Hey, Mr. Pond Boss, tell me what to do to make all my Lunker Lake dreams come true.
Hello everybody, Bob Lusk, the Pond Boss, coming at you live from Granbury, right here, right along the Brazos River, just downstream from Lake Granbury. Hanging out at the RV tonight. Debbie and I are going to have a little supper when we're through here of some stuff we picked up. Don't know what you guys are up to, but glad you're joining us. Got a whole bunch of topics to talk about today. So let's just get at it. You know what I do here? I got to find this on my laptop so I can see it. Girlfriend's going to come over here so I can pet on her a little bit. So, hey, bring your questions. I'm glad to see everybody on here. Trevor, I see Trevor checking in. I saw Trevor today. He's helping get our house remodeled so we can move into it someday. Hope it's soon. James Brady, Steve Scanlon, John Funk checking in. Got his power back on. That's a good thing to get going. So, thanks for jumping in here, joining me. Now, you guys know the drill. Hashtag Pond Boss Magazine in the comments section. And our social media guru asked me a couple days ago, said, hey, why don't you have people that tag their friends? I've never thought of that. So if you've got friends with a pond or a lake, why don't you tag them so they can get involved in this and learn a little bit more about how to take better care of their ponds. So hashtag Pond Boss Magazine, tag your friends, share this to your timeline, and there's one other thing. What is it? Oh, click like. Yeah, click like. That's it. And you're eligible for a drawing for a Pond Boss hat. There's one in living color. And a Pond Boss mug. Say it with me. It keeps hot things hot, cold things cold. We don't know how it knows, but it knows. So here we go. So Trevor got to go fishing under the bridge up there at where the Brazos River runs under the road coming into Pecan Plantation, where we're going to be living here someday. And he caught a fish. That's cool. Hey, Tory Rhodes, good to see you, buddy. Mike Cottrell checking in. Mike is over there in Palapena County. Let's see, Michael Gray. Michael Gray. Hey, Michael, I got a call from a guy outside of Nashville that's got a pond. I'm probably going to be ringing you. I don't know that he needs any dirt work, but I got a couple of questions, so I'm going to call you. Hey, there's Kim Moore checking in from Illinois. Wasn't too far from Kim the other day when I was hanging out with the Herman family. I love the Hermans. They're such good people. They do such great work. They got a great business model too that's helpful to a whole lot of people. So I'm pretty tickled to be home. Let's see here. Tori's asking, any other news on the WOTUS sections? I don't know. I've got several people that are following that. Of course, when you get a change in administrations, you get a change in modifications of the waters of the United States. You know, 5 or 6 years ago, any blue line stream, depending on what state you're in, you could not build a pond. But then some states you could do it and ask for forgiveness. Some states you could just go do it and nobody ever knows. Some states, they don't enforce it. So, who knows? Hey, Danny Mac, good to see you. John Elmer checking in from Indiana. Travis Paul Smith, good to see you. Carlene Woolsey, good deal. Good to see Carlene. So let me see here. Let me see if we got any questions first. But I don't have any questions yet, which is just fine and dandy. So I'm going to throw some things out there. I've got several topics. My first topic I want to talk about was when I got to spend time with Fred and Connie Bingaman in Brownstown, Illinois last week, and Fred had used some Floridone earlier in the summer to treat duckweed. Did I get that glare off my glasses? Maybe so, maybe no. So anyway, I see Katie Cooner checking in. Let's see who else we got. Drew Hay, I see Drew Hay. Carlene's from Texas. Chris Arthur, boy, I tell you what, you guys dodged a bullet, not like you didn't dodge one last year, because good gosh, you had 2 hurricanes hit you last year. You guys, now he's telling me that it doesn't know if I'm broadcasting or not. Anyway, I'm going to keep going. We'll see what happens here. Okay, so anyway, at Fred and Connie's, they've got a beautiful, beautiful lake right there beside their house. And then downstream, they've got a smaller pond. Well, that small pond was covered up with duckweed. So Fred researched it, decided Floridone was the best idea. Hey, Michael Airy, good to see you. So he bought some Floridone. Now, when you start talking about pesticides, herbicides, you know, anything that you're going to put in your pond, you need to know what you're doing. You need to learn it. You need to learn the labels and stuff. There are contact killers, and then there are others that are not. There's some that are systemic, and then the way that Floridone works is the plant takes the chemical up in parts per billion, and it's an enzyme basically that stops the plant's ability to photosynthesize. If it can't photosynthesize, it can't feed itself. So it can't create starch, and it needs sunlight to do that. So it loses its green color. It changes to, sometimes depending on the plant, pink to yellow or white, and then it all dies at one time. And some of Fred's duckweed was gone. He said that probably half of it was gone, but as I looked at it, it was all getting ready to be gone, because that stuff was white to kind of a pale yellow. There was nothing vibrant green about that, and I thought that was a pretty interesting thing to note, that how well that was working over there. And he sent me pictures, and that thing had a whole lot of stuff. What's the best for spatterdock control, safe for all fish and animals? I tell you what, James Brady, I like to use Reward is a good. I tell you, here's what I want you to do. I like rodeo and some of those, but what you do, here's what I'm going to tell you to do. I'm a little bit out of school, not up to date on all the different herbicides. Now, Kelly Duffy comes on this show a lot. He is up to date as anybody is. Go to Aquaplant on the Texas A&M University's internet page, website. Yeah, go to Aquaplant and look up spatterdock and then management options, and it's going to show you what you can do to control that plant. So I think that's the best way to go there. Let's see here. Steve Scanlon, no question, my minnows, bluegill, and red ear I stocked in April are enjoying Aquamax. Feed store didn't have MVP, but the fish don't seem too picky. It's interesting to me because all these different Purina dealers, even though they can all buy the same products, sometimes they don't. You know, so if you wanted MVP, you're going to have to ask them. But if you like feeding 500 or something like that, that works great for small bluegills and minnows. Kevin Briggs, I'm doing fine, thank you. David Schneiderman, good to see David with Easy Docks of Texas checking in. There's Jacob West checking in. Al Glashoff, hi Bob, I've got a pond we just recommissioned. I like that word, that's pretty cool. Partially drained and excavated to remove most of the muck and cattails. Depth is 4 to 12 feet. About 3/4 of an acre in upstate New York. Looking to stock perch and largemouth bass. Any recommendations? I would call Hickling Fish Farm. I'm not sure what part of upstate New York that you're in, but look up Hickling, Hickling. Call those guys. They're going to have some pretty good ideas. If you stock largemouth bass, they're going to dominate, and perch would probably be pretty good forage fish for them. I would also look for pumpkin seeds to help as a forage fish for your bass. I would also consider smallmouth bass in lieu of largemouth bass in upstate New York. Yep, Travis, I was wondering about that. That hurricane barely missed you guys. Brad Bowles, how long into the year should you continue to provide supplemental feeding fathead minnows? I'm not a fan of supplementally feeding fathead minnows because of the conversion rate. When you buy fathead minnows, you're going to pay about $10 a pound. You put them in there, they're not going to survive in a healthy fishing pond. They're not going to survive long enough to be able to establish. So I would rather see you feed fish food or look for something that's in your region that's better bang for the buck. Fathead minnows they really serve two roles. They help jumpstart a brand new pond with newly stocked largemouth bass, and then they are also a good supplemental food like for a channel catfish pond, which I'm going to talk about a channel catfish pond here in just a minute. We'll talk about that just a touch. Let's see, Travis, how's the new little Lusk tot? Well, we just got through talking to Mom a while ago. We'll see them maybe this weekend. She's a living doll. I mean, I'm in love. I'm just in love. I'm in love with all these little grandkids. They're just so fun. Let's see here. I'm going to tackle that channel catfish thing here in just a second. But how long into the year should you provide supplemental feeding? If you're feeding fish food, feed them till they quit eating. If you insist on feeding fathead minnows, I would probably do that 3 or 4 times a year, knowing that it's not a very good bang for the buck. There's other things that are better. And then it kind of depends on what you're feeding as well. If you're trying to feed largemouth bass, you can buy rainbow trout for less money and target the size of bass that you want to feed. Depending on where you are, you can buy crawfish. You can buy crawfish. We just did some crawfish, northern crawfish up in Missouri, and I think they were like 15 cents a piece to 25 cents a piece, depending on the size. You know, if you do it in red swamp crawfish down in Louisiana or Arkansas, parts of Texas, you can buy those in the springtime for $2 a pound, up to $5 a pound, depending on what time of the year it is. So, Micah Jefferson, I read several articles that Pondi helps reduce temperatures in the summer. Is that true? Not necessarily. What Pondi does is it blocks the UV rays of the sun from penetrating. So UV rays are what plants need to be able to grow and thrive and create the energy that they need. So when Pondis are used, they're typically used to reduce UV ultraviolet ray penetration into the water, which is typically used to disrupt algae growth, not kill anything, doesn't kill anything, but it disrupts growth. So that's a good reason to use it, but I don't think that it really changes the temperature of the water. So let's see here. Carlene says I got lots of filamentous algae. Do you recommend copper sulfate or something else to get rid of it? 3/4 acre pond with bass and catfish. You know, I think I'd be tempted to. Now, this time of year in hot water, you got to be really careful, because if you're going to kill that algae, then it's going to decompose really, really fast. And odds are pretty high that if you're seeing it floating on top, it's already dead. It's being fed by what's underneath it. Really, this time of year in the heat of the summer, algae tends to want to grow right after a rainfall event that destabilizes the water chemistry and disrupts the water chemistry. So if you've had a recent rain and then algae has started to grow, if you can put up with it for another couple of weeks, I think it will go away. But here's the answer to your question. I don't know where you are, because if you use copper sulfate in acid water, you're going to kill your fish. You know, so I'd be looking at a chelated copper algicide, or I'd be looking at look at some of the different algicides. There's some that are peroxide based that are very, very safe to use. I would tell you also to go to Aquaplant website, and then in the Aquaplant website, look at the different options that you've got. You know, like Green Clear, whatever, Green Clean, whatever they've got. Look at those and then figure out which one's best for you. Travis is asking me to find out any more about Titan bass. I have called those guys 3 times, have not been able to talk to the right person, but I'm going to stay on that and get that done. Chuck Brinkman checking in from Missouri. Good to see Chuck. Sent me a good picture the other day. Jeff Thompson, best way to add brim spawning habitat in an existing pond that is currently full of water. I tell you what, that's not as easy as it sounds. So what you can do there is, if you can get some geotextile cloth and lay it in shallow water and stake it out, get all the air out from under it, let it breathe, then you can put gravel on top of that shade cloth. Now, I've got some pictures. If you want to see some pictures, send me an email. Just say, hey Bob, send habitat pictures. And I'll do that, because there's a guy just outside of Wichita Falls, Texas, that irrigates out of his pond, and then he turns around and fills it back up with a well. Well, he had a bunch of cattails on one shore, and he wanted to get rid of them because they're unsightly, and he knew that his bluegill aren't spawning like they used to, so he wanted to build a spawning bed. So what he did was he irrigated enough, and over there it evaporates a lot, so he dropped about 3.5 feet out of his pond. Then he brought in a really artsy working, which those two words don't go together very well. Backhoe operator. And he came in with that backhoe, and in a day, he dug up about 100-yard swath of those cattails, and then took the backhoe and created a ledge about 2 feet under the surface of the water when the pond is full. So then he came back in and got a dump truck load of pea gravel and spread the pea gravel on top of that heavy clay. It was heavy clay. That ledge was about 5 feet, 6 feet wide. So he put a 4-inch thick layer of gravel right on top of that ledge, and it worked out great. It looks great. And I've got pictures of that if you guys want to see something like that. Okay, let's see. Carlene's in Houston. Okay. Yep. Is actually Kelly Duffy works out of Waller Hempstead area over there. So I'd connect you up with him to help you figure out what to buy. All right, let's talk about harvesting catfish for a minute. Latham Pugh came up with that question, and actually I got a question from Josh Harris, and I told Josh that I would cover that topic. Josh's frustration is he's got about a half-acre pond with catfish that he feeds faithfully. So I see Tony Edwards checking in. So his dilemma is the fish love that fish food, but that's all they'll eat. So his dilemma is he wants to harvest a bunch of them in his half-acre pond, but he can't catch them, and he doesn't want to go catch them one at a time. So his question to me was, can I set a trot line? Yeah, you can do that. You sure could. You know, what are you going to use for bait? You know, are there any other fish in there? Are there sunfish in there? Now, this is where I think having fathead minnows is a great idea, because what you could do, if you've got a channel catfish pond and you got fathead minnows in there and they have substrate to spawn and they're reproducing, then they turn out to be a good source of forage fish for catfish, and they can perpetuate themselves. So then you can turn around and use those for bait. Now I can't think of the name of there's a soap that's made out of lard, maybe Zote. Look up, you guys, after the show, Google Zote soap. That's a pretty good bait if you want to use a trot line. But let me tell you how I harvested a lot of catfish out of a pond. I would feed them into the same spot where it's fairly shallow. Now, one advantage I've got is I've got a 100-foot seine that you guys don't have. But you could buy a 50-foot seine, and it wouldn't cost a whole lot of money. If you want some information about that, check it out with me, and I'll tell you what to buy and how to get it and where to get it. Hey, there's Josh Milski checking in. He lives in Colorado now. Good to see him. Micah Jefferson, Landon Wyatt. Hey, Landon, I was talking to a guy about you today, talking about bacteria. Told him to get in touch with you. So we'll see how that goes. So now, what I would do is feed those catfish up, and when you got them consistently feeding, then you can feed them up into a corner, pull the seine around behind them, and catch a bunch of them. There was a pond we helped manage over near Memphis, Tennessee. We'd go over there once a month and take care of about 7 or 8 different accounts over there. And one pond, the catfish reproduced. There was a bunch of stumps that were left behind, and the catfish wallowed underneath the stumps, and they were reproducing, and that pond owner didn't want the catfish, so he wanted us to try to help him harvest them periodically. So a couple of times a year, we set up feeders out there. We would feed them up into a cove. And when we knew that there were 300 or 400 catfish up there feeding, and that was about a 5-acre lake, then we'd do that. We'd take a rope, have the seine laying on the bank. When they come up into that cove and they're feeding heavily, then we pull that seine across and trap them. And then pull the seine around, and then we harvest them. And if you're going to harvest them and you got very many, you better have the tools to do it. You're going to need ice, you're going to need tubs, buckets, and be prepared to butcher and clean that number of catfish that you decide to keep. So that's how we did it. And a half-acre pond is not that big. I think you could feed them up into one corner. And if you could buy a really good 50-foot seine that's 8 feet tall, you know, it's going to cost $350. You know, which that's a sizable investment, but it sure is efficient, and you can sure do it quick, and it's fun with the kids and the grandkids. So that's the way I would do it. James Allen talked about Q-Trine Plus, which is one of the chelated coppers I was talking about. So Josh Harris and Latham, there's your question about, there's your answer about about how I would do it. Now, if you want to try to catch those fish, hook and line or with a trot line, one thing that you need to do is don't feed them for about 5 or 6 days. Make sure they're hungry. Then you can concoct a bait. You can take some of your fish food, moisten it, do some additives to it like fish oil. You can add anise, oil of anise. You can do some additives to that fish food. Maybe even take some of that zote soap and mix it with it, and create some cubes, fishing with a treble hook. And then you're going to be likely to catch more fish. But let them not eat for 5 or 6 days so their digestive systems are cleaned out and they're hungry. And then make a bait out of your fish food. Baits I've made before, I would take like Aquamax 500, moisten it. It's already got fish in it. It already smells like fish. Then I would, after it was moistened, I would add cornstarch to it. And I would even add, one time I added some, and I moistened it with, I guess that last time I did it, I used water. So I just moistened it with water. I added some cornstarch, and I added some wheat flakes, and mixed all that together till it was thick and made a dough out of it. And use that dough bait, and those catfish love to eat that. So, if you're going to do that, make a bait that's attractive to like what they eat. And then you're going to do a little bit better trying to catch them. Let's see now. I had another interesting question here. Let me find it. Mike Brutally from Northeast Ohio sent me an email today. I haven't had a chance to answer it yet on the email, but he said that he's got a pond in northeastern Ohio, and there's creeks nearby where he traps minnows, shiners, and suckers from those creeks. Then he goes down and he feeds his bass off the dock. So he wasn't really asking me my opinion about that, but what he was asking me is, he said that he went down to the creek yesterday to start trying to harvest some fish, and he saw a bunch of dead fish. He saw a bunch of dead, he saw 2 big dead carp, a bunch of dead minnows, a bunch of dead sunfish, and some dead suckers. So he climbed in his truck and he drove upstream about 3 miles, and there was dead fish there. So his question to me was, did these fish die from an oxygen depletion? He said it's hot, but not abnormally hot. He said the creek flows through 2 farms. Could they have been poisoned? Well, anytime you see any kind of fish kill that's substantial like that, tell the local Game and Fish Commission, because then they're going to go in and investigate that fish kill and find out what it is. His follow-up question is after this is over, can I keep feeding those fish to my fish? Well, here's going to be my answer to that. There's pros and cons. You know, the pros are they're basically free, and you're harvesting them legally. And I don't know the laws of your state. You know, I barely know the laws of my state. You can harvest some of those fish. But what you got to be careful about is, depending on how you do it, you don't want to harvest any game fish that are against the law. And you need to have some confidence that those are healthy fish. Now, the pros are they're free, except for your labor to go do it. The cons are you're going to introduce fish that you don't necessarily know their lifestyles. How big will those suckers get? Some suckers get to be 5 pounds, so if some of them escape being eaten, is that a big deal? So now you end up with, in a 3/4 acre pond or whatever you got, if you got 50 suckers that are 2 pounds apiece, now they're muddying up the pond. You know, or if you bring in some fish that you don't know the species and don't know how they behave and don't know what they eat, you know, then you've traded issues, or you've created issues, one or the other. So there's that. So what I would tell him is if you're comfortable doing that and you know the pros and cons, then you can make a good decision. But my biggest counsel on this is be sure the Game and Fish Commission knows about that fish kill, because if it's toxins, something's in the water, they need to know that, and they need to find that out, and you need to know that as well. Travis Paul Smith came up with a good idea there. You can catch catfish with a Hoot Net. You sure can. And you can bait them in. I mean, if you buy a Hoot Net, what a Hoot Net basically is it's a collapsible net that's a cylinder that's got kind of a funnel in it. And you can take some hardware cloth, or when I use Hoot Nets, I use pantyhose. And I'll take the leg of the pantyhose, about this much of it. Oh, Debbie just turned around, she's laughing at me. She always wondered what happened to her pantyhose back when she wore them. Oh Lord, she's really looking at me funny now. Where I would cut off about that much of the foot and just stuff it full of fish food, moisten it, and then tie it off and tie it right in the middle of that hoot net. And when those catfish smell that, sense that, they're going to come right into that hoot net. So that is a good way to do that. Yep. All right. So now then, let me see here. Trevor's talking about put a piece of feed on a small hook. There's actually a company, I can't think of the name of it right offhand, that took for a long time. I think they're still around. I believe they're based out of Indiana. I can't remember, but they would take Purina fish food, and they had some kind of a patented method where they would use that fish food and make little pliable pellets, or almost like silicone feeling, and you could catch a bunch of fish on those pellets. And I can't think of the name of it. Somebody will chime in here that's going to know, but that's a pretty good way to go. So let's see here. Mike Dower says, how many sterile grass carp do you recommend for an acre pond, if any at all? I'll tell you exactly how I go through that, and this has been through years and years of trial and error and finally beginning to figure it out. What you do is you go in and map the pond, and it can be something really simple. You can go out in a boat with a rod and reel and a spoon on the end of it and start trying to find out where your plants are. Number one, know the plants you've got. Grass carp don't eat all species of plants. There's some they can't eat. There's some they won't eat. So first of all, you got to find out, is it a plant that they're going to eat? And then secondly, you got to quantify. How much surface area does it cover? So let's say you got a 5-acre lake and you go out there and you figure out that you got 3 acres of weeds that are covering the bottom of the pond, manifesting at the surface along the edges, and you want to reduce their numbers. Then what I would tell you is stock 3 10 to 12 inch triploid grass carp per acre vegetated. So stock 9 or 10 of them at that rate. So stock 3 per vegetated acre. Start with that. Now once you stock too many, you can't unpickle the pickle. So what you want to do is stock enough to gain the control that you want, but not necessarily eliminate all the plants. Now, it's easy for me to sit here and tell you that. It's almost impossible to figure out how to do it. But I know this, I get more calls from people that stock too many than I get from people that stock too few. And you can also go in and kind of clean up spots with herbicides if you want to. So if the grass carp aren't keeping up in the areas that you want, because they're not necessarily going to eat plants in the areas where you want them to, they're going to go eat it where it's convenient and they can get to it. And so the rates can be anywhere from 1 to 3 per acre to start. And in real severe cases, and you want to knock it out fast, you can stock 10 per acre. So, there's what I got about that. Michael Erriger, artificial catfish spawning boxes successful in ponds? Yes. But I tell you what I tend to tell people, if you've got channel catfish in your pond, you don't really want them to reproduce, because then you lose control of the numbers. And channel catfish are notorious for, if they over reproduce, then they're going to outgrow their system, and then there's going to be a fish kill. Because so let's say you have 2.5 pound channel catfish, and 3 of those girls have babies. You now have over 100,000 babies. Let's say only 1% survives. That's 10,000. And let's say half of those disappear. That's 5,000. And so at some point you got too many. So the answer to the question is yes, artificial spawning boxes will work in ponds. That's how fish hatcheries get eggs to be able to produce channel catfish fingerlings, because they have spawning boxes. They go out, collect the eggs, bring them into the hatchery, and they hatch them in an artificial situation. Chuck Brinkman had the same problem. I took some of the fish food, ground it up, mixed it with flour and water, creating a dough bait that smelled like the food I feed them. There you go. There's a good answer. Fareed says, do grandchildren make good bait? Yeah, but they don't live long enough underwater, Fareed. They lose their breath, and then they drown, and then they're no good. If you're going to be fishing with grandchildren as bait, you have to keep them alive. It's kind of hard. But it's even better for them to have the fishing pole off of your dock, catching some of those giant bluegills that you've got. That's pretty funny. We love our grandchildren. I love Fareed and Jennifer's kids too. They're super kids. Let's Stubby Steves. Thank you, Josh. That's it. Stubby Steve's. Now, Fareed, another way that grandchildren make good bait is if you give them the recipe in a mixing bowl and let them put all that together, then they make good fish bait. So there you go. All right, let me see what else we got. Looks like the pond boss got a trim. Yeah, I did. I'm glad y'all are paying attention to that. I was getting pretty scraggly, so I decided maybe it was time to do that before Mama Bear got home. She got home. When'd you get home? Yesterday. We hadn't seen each other in how long? 2 weeks? Something like that, 2 weeks. So I didn't want to look like Santa Claus at the end of August, 1st of September. So, yep, I sheared it right here in the RV. I threw all the hair out, and then the next morning I went out there and I thought there were spider webs everywhere that had dew on them. There's Joe Dupner, Dion Myers, DeAndre Kimbrough is watching. Good to see you guys. All right, if you got questions, throw them at me. If not, I'm going to tackle another topic. Lately, the phone has been ringing off the wall with people that want to design fishing lakes. And it's just really, really interesting to me that the number of people that want to design and build fishing lakes. So I want to just spend a couple of minutes and go through the process of how I do that, what my thought processes are. But first, I want to remind everybody, hashtag Pond Boss Magazine, tag your friends that have ponds and lakes in the comment section. Click like, share this to your timeline, and you're eligible for a drawing for a Pond Boss hat. There it is right there. And the Pond Boss mug that knows how to keep hot things hot, cold things cold. We don't know how it knows, but it knows. So, and also want to say thank you to our sponsors. Purina Mills is a sponsor of this show. I deeply appreciate them. And I'll tell you what I appreciate about them the most is they've been in it for the long haul. And part of their role is, and part of their mission is to help create products for these niche markets around the nation, around the world. And they came to me a long, long time ago, 1995, and started asking, what can we do to help support the pond management industry? And the end gain on that conversation that started then and continues today is creating some good, solid fish foods to help you feed your fish, make them grow faster, make them get bigger, quicker. You know, so I appreciate Purina Mills. Also, love Texas Hunter products. I think they've got the best fish feeders on the market out there. I love their customer service. They're highly responsive, great feeders. There's a bunch of good fish feeders. I love a lot of them. I love Texas Hunter, especially because of their customer service and the quality of the feeders. So there you go. And also David Schneiderman, sponsorship, Easy Docks of Texas. Check out David's Facebook page. He'll take you to Easy Dock. So let's see here. All right, Dave Weber, will largemouth bass not control channel catfish numbers? You know, I'll tell you, I'm going to answer that. Yes, they can. Now, if those baby channel catfish have all the habitat they need that they can hide and grow up and repopulate, then largemouth bass don't control them totally. But in most ponds that have largemouth bass and bluegills, baby bluegills, see when a baby channel catfish is first hatched, it's yellow, and it's about that big, little bitty thing like that. And then once it absorbs its yolk sac, it starts turning dark, and it just looks like a little bug swimming in the water. So bluegill can annihilate a lot of them. But if you got a catfish pond only with fathead minnows, you're going to have an overpopulation of catfish. So yes, largemouth bass can help control channel catfish numbers, but that doesn't mean they're going to eradicate them. And it might mean that they can keep them in check. It might not. And it depends on if those little channel catfish have the right kind of habitat, like riprap, that's from softball to volleyball size riprap, and they can get in that and hide and eat, and not come out till they're 5 or 6 inches long and be able to scamper back in there. Then the survival rates go up. So a lot of the answer to that question revolves around habitat. Billy Miller, do bluegill not feed as much at night? I had to switch my feeder to nighttime due to ducks. Now I only see the albino catfish. They'll get used to it. Now, when you switch it, they get conditioned to whatever time that you had it on. But yes, they'll come and feed at night, but they're going to have to get used to that. And it may happen in 2 or 3 days. It may happen in a week. But at some point, they'll get used to it and they'll come. Steve Scanlon is asking, so you know what? I'm going to back up here. I'm missing some. Jonathan Stoddard, what's the easiest do-it-yourself product to use to control phosphorus levels in a pond? Do it yourself. Okay, I think the way I want to answer that question is plants take it up. So plants consume phosphorus. Now, I don't remember the numbers, but it's something like 1,000 pounds of bushy pondweed wet weight has like 2 to 3 pounds of phosphorus in it. So if you've got plants growing, you can harvest the plants, take them out, get rid of phosphorus that way. You can use floating islands to help get rid of some of the phosphorus. Now, if you're going to do it yourself, you need to have a really, if you want to use some kind of product, then you got to understand those products. You got to understand Phosclear. You got to understand alum. You got to understand blue-green algae. You got to understand planktonic algae. So, if you're going to do it yourself, part of the success rate of using product is the initial analysis. It's based on what somebody that knows what they're doing can go figure out in terms of the volume of living matter that you've got that has got phosphorus bound. If phosphorus is bound in living matter like algae or aquatic plants, you're not going to extract it by using some kind of a product, do it yourself. So and actually that science is evolving right now. 5 years ago we didn't have that conversation. 7 or 8 years ago we didn't, but now we are. Now it's been known that alum can bind phosphorus. It's been known that this Phosclear started hitting the market, that it can do it. But until people have actually gotten out there, started using it, quantifying it, they've started figuring out that it takes a little bit more analysis before they actually do it. Let's see here. Let me back up. Josh says, why don't fish eat tadpoles? I'm going to tell you the Bob Lusk theory on that. They taste bad. I think when a fish sucks in a tadpole, it gives off some kind of a pheromone that's offensive to the fish, which is a defense mechanism for that succulent little tadpole to be able to live long enough to turn into a frog. Now, what's really funny about that, the day that it turns into a frog, that pheromone goes away and it's fair game. Even though that tadpole might have lived for 2 years to turn into a frog, a great blue heron is going to eat it, or a bass is going to eat it if it doesn't figure out quick how it's not going to get eaten. Okay, let me see here. Let me see here. Scroll down a little bit. Not scrolling very good. Steve Scanlon with fall and winter coming up. Any tips or things to be aware of going into fall and winter? Thank you for your answers. Yeah, I tell you, one of the things that is very important to me, and right now is the time to be doing it, is make sure you've got the happiest of water you can have going into the fall. And this is especially important going into winter months for northern pond owners. If you don't have good, clean, healthy, happy water going into the wintertime, and we have a harsh winter, and you're under ice for 90 days or 120 days or whatever, you stand a higher risk of winter kill. So I'd be thinking about ways that you can move the water through aeration or extract aquatic plants that have become nuisance. When I say nuisance, what I really mean by that is too much plant life. If you can extract some of that and set the stage for your pond to have good, clean water going in to the winter, that's one thing I would do. Let's see, what else can we think about? That's a good time to start looking at, I'd say, as you get into the fall, service your equipment, service your feeders, because at some point the fish are going to stop eating. And do you want to take the battery out, put it in the freezer, or do you want to leave the feeder running all winter long? Look at the manufacturer's recommendations on what to do with some of your equipment, like aeration equipment. And let's see, what else? Yeah, water and aquatic plants, that's the two biggest things. Another thing I would sure think about between now and then, if you need to cull some fish and you haven't, do that. Because when we have a harsh winter, And fish that go in with a relative weight of 80 to 90% or 75 to 85%, their odds of survival plummet compared to those fish that are healthy. So I'd look at those three things. I'd look at making sure your water's healthy, happy, move it with aeration, manage your plants. I would think physical removal is an intelligent way to do it. If that's not practical, at least get those plants knocked out at the end of the summer, and manage them. Put your grass carp in there, whatever you want to do to manage those plants. Now, if you're gonna manage them with a herbicide, wait, and check that plant, because most plants that you use a herbicide on have to take it up, and once they begin to go dormant, they're not going to take it up. You're not going to get nearly the kill. So that's one of the kind of things that you got to learn is if you're going to use herbicides, if you're going to do that, look at doing it sooner rather than later, but be smart about it. And then the third thing is cull fish. Take care of your water, take care of your equipment, cull fish. Robbie Old, how do you control nutrients from entering a pond? I get a lot of runoff. Any natural options? One option that people do is they'll build a little silt pond or a catch pond upstream and let it capture water. Let the silt and stuff settle out. The water overflows. Another way to do that is to help control nutrients is to vegetate the watershed. And if in a perfect world, if you could run water through a wetland or a marshy area before it gets to your pond, then the plants in the wetland will take up some volume of those nutrients before the water gets to your pond. Travis, my friend stocked a half-acre pond, fathead minnows and bluegills last June, stocked a few bass. 5 weeks ago, he's caught 8 catfish, about a pound each, but he didn't put any catfish in there. How'd they get there? Oh, Travis, I don't know. I mean, if it says it's a half-acre pond, so if it's a new pond, I don't have an answer. If it's a pond that got rehabbed and there were puddles of water left and they didn't kill the fish in the puddles, that's where they came from. Could be a good friend up down the road had a few extra catfish. You want to share them with him, threw them in there and came by and forgot to tell him. Say, oh hey, I had some catfish, I threw them in there. They could swim from another pond. There's so many possibilities, and there's really no answer for that. I don't know how they got in there. I can't imagine if he's buying his fish from a reputable fish hatchery. I can't imagine them bringing in catfish with a load of fathead minnows, for example, or bluegills. So I don't know. And depending on what kind of catfish they are, that'll help him decide what he wants to do. So until you ask some more questions, I'm going to kind of take you through a process. I had a guy call me today. He lives up in north central Missouri. He wants to build a lake. He just bought some land for recreation, for hunting, and he wants to put a fishing lake on there for his kids and grandkids, which that has been a big trend in 2021. I think I've worked with more landowners in 2021 designing ponds than I probably did for the last 5 years before that combined. So, hey honey, I'm doing a show. So what I do first is I start looking at maps. And I just happen to have one right here. I start looking at maps. Now look at the topography. I want to see how the land lays. I want to study the watershed area. I want to look on those topographical maps and see if there's a place that makes sense to build a dam. And once you study a topo map long enough, the best sites start to jump out at you. And that's the first thing I do is I start looking at maps. Now, what I don't do is I don't design dams. I don't do that. I'm not an engineer. I don't play like one. I don't act like one. However, I'm comfortable looking over the shoulder of an engineer. I'm real comfortable doing that. Let him teach me. And then after I understand the way the dam's going to be designed, then I love to visit with the earth movers. Because the earth movers, as they're building that dam, they can do some things with features in that lake to make it a good fishing lake. So where my role comes in really is to help that landowner design fish habitat based on his goals, based on that site, and based on what nature offers for that site. What I mean by that is is we did a lake, helped a guy down near Drexel, Missouri. That property's covered up in rocks. Oh my gosh, we built some of the coolest rock structures, used trees, brush piles. We did some very, very fun stuff with that. Now I went and looked at one in Iowa last week, and all he's got's dirt. So the earth mover, very receptive. And instead of taking and using the scraper for long distance hauls just to move dirt and leave it smooth, he stair stepped it. So he would take the scraper, go down a little bit, go down to about 5 feet of depth, one scraper wide, and then move over and do it again. So he's leaving ledges underwater where we can put structure, put trees and things. And they did harvest some trees off that site to get to the dirt. So they set those trees aside. A logger came in and logged some trees that had value. And so that left the root balls. So we're taking those root balls and we're going to turn them upside down and use them in clumps. So the next part of my job is to help create the best habitat based on what that landowner's goals are and what the site has to offer. But what I'm thinking there is in this case, he wants, in the case of the guy that called me today from northern Missouri, he wants largemouth bass, bluegill, maybe yellow perch, red ear sunfish, maybe pumpkin seeds. That's what he wants to start with. So what I have to know, which I've learned over the years, is what is the habitat for all those species of fish? How do they reproduce? What do they eat when they're little? What kind of structure or cover or home do they like when they're 2 inches long? How do they behave? And so then we go out and I call it underwater communities. We'll go out and design underwater communities. And like this lake in Iowa is going to be about 8 or 9 acres. So we're trying to create communities around that lake based on its depth and the shoreline configuration. So what they're doing there is there's some natural points that they're going to leave and then cut ledges around there. Spawning beds are going to be important for sunfish. So we plan in spawning beds, we plan in dense habitat, we plan in, fish attractors for big fish, but we got to think about who's going to fish it. I mean, who wants to take a 10-inch diameter oak tree, topple it over in the water, and then go try to catch a bass out of it? Nobody. So rather than do it that way, then I have them cut off the small limbs. Now, it's tedious to do that, but it's worth it because it's going to last a long, long time. And for those of you guys that want some habitat pictures because you're going to design a lake, send me an email, info@pondboss.com, and I'll send you a little document that I've put together so you can see that. And so then, like what I'll do is once I see the lake, then I'll go, I don't have a CAD program or any of that kind of stuff, so I just go hand draw stuff. So the one up in Iowa, I hand drew this little map. I went and met the guy, took a look at it, and then I came back and I drew this map, and it was basically to show him placement for all the different kinds of structure that I'm recommending. And so you can see the little yellow lines right there. Those are shelves that are about 3 feet to 4 feet underwater, and every little orange mark are spawning beds. And those wiggly things are trees, and then the smaller, darker things, those are little root ball piles. So that's what he's got to use. There's kind of he's going to rip wrap one side because this is a long, narrow lake, sort of, and his prevailing winds are going to be such that one of the shorelines with southwesterly winds and northeasterly winds is going to get chewed up pretty good. So he's going to rip wrap that on, and he's going to put the rip wrap on top of geotextile cloth so it will stay put. So that's a little bit about the process that I go through. And once I understand what it's going to take to build the dam, and then what process the earth movers are going to go through, then we start working on a habitat plan. Working on one outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma, one near Jacksonville, Texas, one near Post, Texas right now, one in central Missouri, 2 in Oklahoma, the one in Iowa, and I just got a call from a guy in Florida that thinks he wants to excavate a pond. So it's really been pretty darn interesting. Okay, let's see here. I'm going to scroll back up here so I can see what's going on. Let's see here. I'm missing some things here. Okay, Travis says he was shocked. I bet he was shocked. Jack Hamilton, hi, Bob, Indiana Jack here. The tilapia have done a great job this summer. Now, how do I harvest them before they die this winter? I've not had much luck catching them on a hook. They're really hard to catch on a hook. You know, I don't know how big your pond is, but if you're a good candidate where they're coming to fish food, you can catch them on fish food, but it's going to be one season, twosies. However, if you can get them feeding to that fish food and you can come behind them with a seine, I'll tell you what you might do. Call Matt Rail or call whoever sold you the tilapia. Matt Rail at American Pond Management in Rusheville, he's got seines, and he might have seines will travel. I don't know. I haven't talked to him about it, but you might be able to do it. All right, let me see here. Let's see what we got here. Travis wants to ask everybody to pray for the families of our fallen heroes and the ones that have lost most or everything they own here in Louisiana and Mississippi. Absolutely right. That's absolutely right. You know, you never know how fortunate you are until you start looking around and seeing that those that are less fortunate than we are. And these people have been through it before, and now they're having to go through it again. And some of them are getting it worse than they did, some didn't. But there's wholesale devastation down there. And the fallen heroes, you know, we can never say enough for them and now their families. So prayers right there. Debbie wants to have a moment of silence. So let's you know what? I love that idea. Let's do it. I'm going to say a quick prayer right now while we're here. And amen. Brian, let's see. Okay, Joe Dupner says, do barley bales really work? You know, I've used barley to help control algae before, and I've had mixed results. And I'm going to tell you the overall results are yes, they do work. But you're trading problems. Because when you use the barley on the algae, then you turn around and you got barley rotting in your pond. So now you're adding nutrient load to your pond. And if it's a fairly new pond or a young pond, that's probably okay. But I'd be a little cautious with it. However, yeah, try it and see. Brian Epting, hi Bob, I got my pond water ready to stock in October. 1.5 to 2 acres, starting with 3 to 5 inch bluegill, 1 to 3 inch red ear, and gambusia before putting bass in next year. This is what my local fishery has. Question: what's the minimum amount I should put in for a healthy start? I'm going to come at you from two different directions. It kind of depends on your goals, your budget, and your timeline. If you have a short timeline and a bigger budget, stock more. But and you know, Brian, I don't remember where your pond is. I should remember that, but I apologize, I don't. So type it in there real quick. Tell me where your pond is, because what I'm going to tell you will depend on that. But here's what I'm going to tell you. I think you need to stock at least 500 bluegill per acre with at least 150 red ear per acre. I would find fathead minnows. The gambusias are okay. You don't need many of those because they're going to live in shallow water and reproduce. So if you could get 5 pounds of those, depending on what they cost, but I would sure try to find 10 pounds per acre of fathead minnows. And then be sure they have a substrate to spawn on. Fathead minnows like to stick their eggs on the underneath sides of firm objects. So be sure that you've got substrate. Pallets work well. PVC pipe that's 3 or 4 inches in diameter or bigger works really, really well. Bundled in shallow water. You know, plexiglass works real well if you got a way to float it. You know, and so you can sure do that. And now if you really want to push the pond, you know, for a 2 acre pond, then stock 1,000 bluegills per acre, 250 red ear per acre, and up to 20 pounds of fathead minnows per acre. I see Adam Chandler and Bill Russell watching. Glad to have you guys on. So that's kind of what I got for tonight. If any of you want that information, send me an email and I'll handle it for you. So Brian, I don't know if my computer's frozen up or what's going on. Let me look here. I'll look on my phone. I see Cindy Melton checking in. Brock Wren. Okay, I did miss some things. Let me knock this out. Brock Wren, Who is the best for water quality test? Fertilized 10-acre pond with 20 gallons over the last 6 months, spreading evenly with no results. Brock, I tell you, there's a couple of labs. I like the Texas A&M Soil Sciences Lab for a general water chemistry test, but you can also get in touch with the Aquatic Diagnostic Lab at Texas A&M, which is at the Experimental Fish Farm. If you can't find them, let me know and I'll guide you right there. Just send an email for you. And then you need somebody to help you interpret those results. Steve Roosh, good to see you. Okay, all right, let's see here. All right. Brian Epting, South Carolina. I'm going to put gravel in for fatheads when I can find them. Fatheads won't spawn on gravel. They're going to spawn on the underneath sides of something firm, like wooden pallets. And you should be able to get those in South Carolina. There's going to be hatcheries there and people that provide them. So check with your supplier again. Tell them that you're going to be adamant about wanting some fathead minnows. They make a significant difference in the first year's growth of your bass. So I would do that. Travis, appreciate all you do. Heck yeah. Shout out to Miss Debbie. Travis says hello, honey. Travis Paul Smith. He's a big good friend here. John Elmer, you're welcome. Chuck Anzalone, good. Josh, you're welcome. Glad you checked in, Josh. We need to hang out again one of these days. All right, so I think I'm gonna wrap it up right there. We're getting close to the end of the hour. We're not quite there, but we're very close. So, hey, tell your friends, share this with them. And Pond Boss Magazine, $35 a year, cheaper than a Friday night date, and it lasts a year. I just bought enough stuff for supper at the grocery store, $58. We have enough for 2 meals, maybe, if you like mozzarella cheese. So here we go, $35 a year, and I guarantee you there's a nugget in every issue of the magazine that you can put to work and use. And that helps, support this show as well. And it's just good reading. What can you say about that? So, once again, hey, thanks for checking in. Not sure where I'll be next Wednesday, but wherever I'll be with you. So, we'll look forward to seeing you guys next Wednesday, you guys and gals next Wednesday. And thanks for checking in. Thanks for watching. We appreciate it. And keep those people that are hurting in your thoughts and prayers.